Recently, I found myself asking a business owner a question that, based on his response, no one had ever asked him before. What were you trying to accomplish the last time you refreshed your succession plan? He smiled politely and leaned back in his chair. That's an interesting question, he said, and then he took a pause. And it wasn't because he did not have an answer. He probably had an overwhelming amount of answers circling in his mind. But the silence he offered reflected the passage of time since he last considered the question. Eventually, he said, to be honest, I was just trying to protect what I was trying to build. At that time, my company was growing rapidly. Cash flow, paying my debts, was a significant issue. Employees were hard to attract, and his children and family were very young. His family and his business heavily relied on him. Every planning decision at that time reflected the realities around him. And then I asked a follow-up question. If you were creating that plan today, would you be trying to accomplish the same things? Again, the room became quiet as he offered his silence as a chance to reflect and perhaps pivot. And this was because the plan that he had wasn't wrong. It's just that the situation and perspective had changed, so the questions around the plan had to change as well. One of the privileges of working with business owners over the last few decades is that you get to recognize patterns that are not immediately obvious. Very few successful entrepreneurs neglect their business. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They spend a lot of time questioning almost everything. They question their systems. They question their processes. They question whether they have the right people on their team in order to be able to achieve that next level of growth. They invest in technologies, sometimes in order to adapt to changing markets, but sometimes in order to get ahead of them. They challenge their previously held assumptions that were probably perfect 10 years ago because they understand that success has a way of changing your perspective. The business that they lead today is rarely the same business that they started. And this isn't a sign of failure, rather this is a reality of growth. The same evolution of thought should be applied to your legal, tax, and financial planning strategies that come along with your business. Think back to when you started or were early stages of development in your company. The reality was considerably different. You were in survival mode. You weren't even sure if you were going to make payroll. Every new contract and every new expense mattered. You would naturally assume that you were going to become successful, and your work ethic was required in order for you to make that a reality. The statistics show that most businesses fail in the first 5 years, either due to a lack of capital, a lack of management, or a lack of leadership. And you were praying and hoping and working as a demonstration of your faith in yourself that you wouldn't become a statistic. You earned your success one step at a time, one failure at a time, one day at a time. And as the business and you matured, so did your problems. Hiring the right team became more important than finding the next customer. Systems started replacing improvisation. You stopped asking whether the business would survive and started considering whether the business could survive without you. The questions changed because the circumstances changed, and that is perfectly normal. So here's the question that I find myself asking more and more of my clients. What exactly was your planning supposed to accomplish the last time you looked at it? And if your business and circumstances have changed so dramatically over the last few years, has your plan grown and adapted with it? I've lost count on how many business owners I talk to that have made this remarkable statement. I never imagined that my company would become so valuable. And it's not because of the number that's attached to the business, but because it reveals something deeper in the situation. Their plan was limited to their forward-thinking perspective and to the limitations of their biases. Most planning was contingent around a company that they hoped to build one day. The trajectory of their original dream may be radically different than the company that they own today. Those two contrasts The business that they wanted to create and the business that they own today may be significantly different. And they most often should not be supported by the same kind of planning that they originally considered. The most successful clients I have are the ones that brought their plan along with them. They treated their plan like a living and breathing document. The least successful clients I have are the ones that created a plan and left it behind somewhere around mile marker 1 and even have forgot what the contents are. They treated it as a one-time planning event and never refreshed it. They've incorporated, but they forgot to revisit the structure. They've drafted a will, but have forgot to review it. They've purchased insurance, but can't even remember the broker's name. They established a shareholder agreement, but they've forgotten what the details are. Gradually, planning feels like a one-time checklist rather than an ongoing discipline. And I get it. Most of these original decisions remain excellent decisions. And again, the issue isn't whether those decisions were right or wrong. The more pressing issue is to try and understand what was the planning supposed to accomplish and does it still do that? Every planning recommendation is an answer, but the answer only makes sense in the context of asking the right questions. As the situation and questions evolve, it's reasonable that the answer should evolve as well. Because time and circumstance rarely remain still, new information requires new consideration and new decisions may be a result. Several years ago, I had a conversation with a business owner who wanted to treat their children equally. And this, of course, was an entirely reasonable objective. But I had to ask the follow-up question, do the children want the same thing? And it turns out they didn't. One hoped to run the business one day. One really didn't care. And the other one wanted nothing to do with the business. Suddenly, the conversation moved from discussing equality of outcomes to fairness. These, of course, are related ideas, but they're not identical. The planning changed because a better understanding of the different objectives produced a different conversation. Over the years, I've become increasingly convinced that the best planning meetings never or rarely begin with the conversation about tax, although it's an important piece. They begin with an establishment of purpose and values. What is the number one things that their clients want to accomplish in the big picture? What has changed perhaps since original planning was done? Are there new or changed familial or financial responsibilities? How has your definition of success evolved? These deeper questions rarely produce immediate answers. They're designed to slow the conversation down and provide some space for reflection, because the quality of the planning are always almost determined by the quality of the questions that precede it. Something else that has fascinated me are about the great business owners that have become exceptionally great at minimizing tax. They've understood and played the game, whether that's corporate structuring, specific investments, or setting aside a lot of their retained earnings into a life insurance policy inside their corporations. But they've missed asking the broader question, what is this all for? Is your primary objective to create opportunities for your children? Are you trying to preserve a family business or provide security for a spouse after you're gone? Are you hoping to reward some loyal employees or make some significant donations to causes and charities that are important to you? The answers are remarkably different and unique and special for every family and every individual, which is precisely the reason why planning should never begin with any strategy or product. It should always begin with purpose. Eventually, conversations like this lead to discussions about protecting their families against a future tax liability. This objectives leads to an inquiry about estate freeze transactions. The goal was never to implement an estate freeze or purchase a life insurance policy. The goal was protecting the value of their estate. An estate freeze by itself isn't a goal, it's a strategic response to achieve an objective. If the value of your business has grown beyond what anyone anticipated, if you've accumulated wealth that didn't exist when the original plan was created, if your family circumstances or priorities have changed, it may be worth considering whether those planning situations should be changed given the change of circumstance. I didn't say it should, but it would be worth considering. The same principle also applies to all facets of planning: trusts, life insurance, corporate reorganizations, shareholder agreements, wills. These strategies don't exist because they're fashionable. They exist because they're trying to solve a problem. And until we understand what the problem is, discussing strategy or financial tools is just quite premature. The most productive meetings is where we stop asking today's questions and start considering tomorrow's problems. As I've reflected over the years, I find that the most successful planning is related to the most successful leadership. Neither one is static or ever considered finished. Both require occasional reflection, and sometimes that includes the humility to revisit prior assumptions. Those assumptions might have made perfect sense, but no longer reflect reality. The conversations between client and advisor need to start asking whether what we've already done still reflects where we are today. Perhaps that's why I enjoy these conversations as much today as when I first entered this profession. The legislation and the tax rules are always changing. Financial products and strategies do evolve. What never changes is the privilege of helping somebody think more clearly about the life that they've built and consider the options when they want to move forward to the next step. So let me leave you with the same question that we started in this video. What were you trying to accomplish when you first put your plan in place? Not what strategy you implemented or who advised you to do it. Not the scope of the tax or legal legislative framework that was in place at the time you did it. What were you trying to accomplish? And if you were sitting down today, knowing everything that you've learned over the last years, knowing what your life and business have become, how would you answer that question? In the same way? If you would, then there's every possibility that your planning should remain where it is, effective and relevant. If your answer has changed, or you think your answer has changed, perhaps the planning deserves another conversation. Not because yesterday's decisions were wrong. You were just answering yesterday's questions. And again, one of the greatest mistakes of planning is not that we don't plan, is that we fail to evolve the plan as we do. If you found this video to be helpful in your journey of discovery of politics, history, economics, financial literacy, and philosophy, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for upcoming videos.